All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Katie Salen and I'm going to be the moderator today. We do, as Steve said, we have an incredible panel. This is the most interesting, at least esports panel I've been on for a while, which is really amazing. We've got parent perspective, youth player perspective, a bunch of different kind of educator perspectives, in school, out of school. We're going to structure the panel today around 3 questions that we've agreed that we think might be of interest to you guys. Talk about those a little bit. We're going to leave a lot of time for Q&A. It's also informal, so if you have a question as somebody's talking, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, we want this to be an exchange about what we've learned and what we're optimistic about and what we're worried about. So let's just do a quick introduction, go down the row so that everyone can put a name to a face.
My name is Reeran Kim, and I have a daughter who plays Overwatch, and I have experience in being a supportive parent.
I'm Yunhee. My player handle name is Anyun, and I'm an aspiring Overwatch player, or pro player.
What's your main?
Oh, Anyun.
What's your main?
Anyun.
What? What's your main?
Oh, I mean support.
I'll support.
Hi, I'm Jay Collins. I used to work at the Department of Education where I did game-based education policy, including some on esports. Right now I'm a teacher at an all-girls school in Cleveland, Ohio, named Hathaway Brown. I also have an esports evaluation startup called Liminal Esports.
Hi everybody, my name is Josh Hafkin. I started Geico's gaming program, then transitioned over to Bethesda Softworks, and now I run an after-school program for kids that treats games like sports.
My name is Chris Aviles. I'm a classroom teacher from New Jersey that started the country's first middle school esports team. So my kids, we practice during the school year, during the school day, as part of an athletic program.
Great. So let me just get a quick read of the room in terms of who's in the room. How many of you are new to esports? A couple. How many of you are educators interested in doing stuff with esports or have done stuff with esports? How many of you work for a nonprofit or for a company that's looking to get into esports or doing stuff with esports? Okay, and how many of you are funders interested in doing funding awesome esports work? Okay, so we got a mix of folks. Okay, so we're going to start. Our first question is around what kinds of paradigms currently exist around esports and education. So there's a number of different models that are popping up around the country, and the models are different in terms of what they emphasize, what their vision and mission is around how they're supporting kids, and sort of what the leverage point is. So I'm gonna open it up to Jay, Josh, and Chris, and I can talk a little bit about one that I'm in at the end. So maybe we can just start at the end, Chris, and we'll move this way.
Sure. So what makes my program unique is that I kicked and screamed until they made it part of the athletics program. And because of that, I'm allowed to tie attendance and grades, behavior, as well as tap into the resources available through athletics. Which is how we got these wonderful jerseys, which are one of the first things I bought because I wanted my kids very quickly to feel part of something. As an educator, I always say it's Maslow's before Bloom's, and the idea that I could get my kids to feel a part of something where they maybe have traditionally not been part of something is really important to me. And so I would say my model is more of a typical, I played college rugby and I've coached football, wrestling, and track at the varsity level, and I treat my esports program just like I would my other varsity athletics programs.
So Chris, it's for middle school?
Yeah.
So how does it work? Is it after school? How many days a week?
So we have an advisory period, which is kind of about an hour and a half, and through that hour and a half, my 6th, 7th, and 8th graders will cycle in. And it's nice because I see them all for half an hour, but then I have 6th and 7th in the beginning, 8th at the end. So we go through our typical practice, our drills and stuff like that, and then we will play our matches after school. And so depending who we're playing, we played Steve's middle school, we played a middle school out in Pennsylvania. I had an international match lined up until my wife decided to give birth and I had to cancel that. But we would have had to come back at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon to play them. And then, we've even done a couple matches during that advisory period because it's really hard to find other middle schools, or sometimes high school, tournaments or stuff won't let us in. So we also played Rutgers this year, and we did some stuff with Seton Hall and stuff like that. So basically, we'll play anybody at any time.
Okay, question.
Can you explain what you mean by advisory period?
So advisory period is during the school day. Kids have lunch, kids have recess, but they can also meet with teachers either for extra help or for clubs.
Okay, so your model, as you mentioned, is a sort of sports model, so it's focused on competition, where kids are practicing and then they're competing with other schools.
Right. I tell my kids we're here to win first, have fun second.
Okay.
So same way I approach my other athletics. Yeah.
Okay, so who participates? Like,
So it's my 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I would say what makes it unique is generally I think esports appeals to underserved kids. So whether it's because of their physicality and they're just not meant for football, or I have students with IEPs, 504s, disabilities, and this is the first opportunity that they've had to be part of a sport because esports is really inclusive, I think, by nature. So I open up to anybody in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I will take 5th graders, maybe we'll get to it later, but I have like a little ecosystem I work through where, there's jobs and roles, marketing, social media, finance, journalism, reporting, casting. And so I will allow some super excited 5th graders to fill those roles. But 6th, 7th, and 8th grades allowed to try out. I didn't have to do cuts this year, but it looks like there's going to be some cuts next year.
Okay, we have a question, then a question. Yep.
What games is your middle school esports program?
So the only game that we are currently allowed to play is Rocket League. I started with Overwatch. The Board of Ed said absolutely not. I then pivoted to League of Legends, all in the same presentation. I split my board like 5-4 on League of Legends, but it was Rocket League was the only thing that they would pass.
Okay, a question here.
Do you offer any scholarship?
So as a middle school, we don't offer any scholarships, but in the future, I'd love to hear that my kids, through the middle school program and hopefully maybe in the high school program, qualify for something down the road.
Okay, so let's go next to Josh. So that's a model around sports in school, so it's connected to the athletic department. It's competition oriented. Okay, Josh.
The way I see my program is we are the club team, and I see us now currently supporting our local high schools as they're starting their programs, but also very similar to traditional sports. Soccer, swimming, basketball, you play on your club team, but you train, or you play on your high school team, but you really do your training with your club team. So the way in the model that we're looking at is we support the high schools. We train our members in a variety of different esports. We're kind of like the middle school gym teachers of esports in the sense that it's our job to give them an intro to Rocket League, League of Legends, Overwatch, Super Smash Brothers, so that they can find where they excel at. But the main thing is that we're talking about the learning process. It's not about as much the getting better as much as it's about learning how to learn. And so that's what we really kind of stress for not just our members, but our coaches as well. The other thing is that for both kids and coaches, there's very, very few bottom rungs to the industry. So if you're an esports coach, how do you get your start? If you're an esports competitor, how do you get your start? And I was really frustrated that there was no place in my community that I could go to learn anything about this. If you want to learn how to play basketball, there's courts and camps. If you want to learn how to swim, there's pools and clinics. But there was nothing for esports. And so it quickly, I realized that not only are we serving the kids and that demographic, we serve middle and high schoolers, but also those coaches whose skills have gone pretty unvalued and might be working at other opportunities now have an opportunity to work in esports where they're passionate about, learn things, and I really see my program as a stepping stone onto hopefully bigger and greater opportunities for both our kids and our coaches.
Okay, so Josh, is your program after school and in the summer? When do kids come? And
So
who
during
are
the year, it's an after-school program. We do tournaments, birthdays, daily classes. We run essentially a video game community center. And then in the summer, we add summer camp that just sits right on top of that. So anybody who's training trains all year round, and then we add our birthdays and summer camps, which really drive revenue on top of that.
Okay, great. Thanks. Jake.
Sure. So, like I said, I was over at the U.S. Department of Education and under the Obama and the Trump administration, and we were talking about esports policy and this new thing that seemed to be affecting schools years ago. And we had some theory about it, and we thought it would go a particular way, and then I moved to rural Ohio because why not? And and I became a teacher there, right? And I tried to put some of the theory that we had been talking about into practice, and it didn't quite work. So We experimented a little bit. I work at an elite all-girls school. We're actually the #1 private school in Ohio, Hathaway Brown in Shaker Heights, which is right outside of Cleveland. And I put a poll out, and I said, out of our 400 upper school girl and trans identifying students, how many of you would like to play League of Legends? Because that was one of the most popular ones. We only got two responses to that. So was not something that they were interested in. We started looking around at some of the other leagues that were out there, and we couldn't really find the right fit for what our students wanted. So we ended up making something that fit Cleveland, right? Because Cleveland's kind of it's a weird place. I can say that because I grew up around there. But we made something that fit us, and we grabbed 8 other schools and libraries and try to make intentionally inclusive, right? So we were grabbing rural schools, urban schools, underperforming, overperforming, all kinds of different places. And we set up a 10-week season, and we played not one game, right? Not 2 games, but 3 different games across that season. Because my theory is that, like, if you name a type of a movie, right, like you say Transformers or something, immediately you're talking about a demographic that likes that movie. It's the same thing with games. You say League of Legends or something else like that, immediately you're grabbing people who like that game. So if instead of doing 1 game, we do 3 games, right, we're pulling in more students than we would be otherwise. So we ran a 10-week season across 3 different games, we called it a triathlon. The top 2 teams were amazing competitors, but they were from an underperforming urban Cleveland school and a under-resourced rural school out on the border of Pennsylvania. And to see them come together, completely different worlds, never met each other, and to see them coming away, and the feedback that we got from this was, I want to know the other students in my area. I want to be able to talk to those students that we played in the city. I want to be able to talk to the students that we saw in the country, and that to me said a lot.
And for any of the tournaments, are they in person or it's all virtual?
Yeah, so it was all local, right? And we understood that people couldn't get to the same place at the same time, especially our library teams, right? Because they were coming after school to their libraries. So we ran most of the season all online, and then our championship match was in person. And so we had only 2 teams competing at that, but we had 5 teams show up, right? Because they were so excited. We had a whole arcade in our school. Teachers were mixing, administrators were mixing.
Yep, cool. Question and then question, yeah.
I might have missed it. What games? 3 games?
Yeah, so we put in a panel of experts, and we had that panel pick based on games that had been suggested to us from students. And so we ended up playing Hearthstone, Rocket League, and Heroes of the Storm. And those selections, we expect to change if we do it again next year. Because the idea is that the game selection should be up to the students in the schools, because that's what they're interested in. We also recognized that it needed to be mission aligned, and so we came from the start and said there will be no first-person shooters in our league. It's not of interest.
Okay, one question here.
Was there any pattern of which type of games gravitated towards which games?
Yeah, there was, and I think it was a little bit similar to what Chris was saying, was we saw a lot of kind of, I don't want to use the term disaffected, but like uninvolved, right? So like I had a student who we were concerned like she was really even engaging with the school at this point. And her mom contacted me and was like, I want her to be a part of this because I think that might provide an in for her, for our school, and for her to care more about her schoolwork. And she came out of it after week 4, she came up to me and she said, can we make t-shirts? And I heard the same story, not just at my school, but at other schools too. We saw these students who found a sense of team spirit in something where they couldn't find it otherwise.
Yes, my question was more just, is there a pattern between which types of students gravitated towards the 3 different titles?
Absolutely, yeah.
What did you notice?
I mean, my school is special and unique and local, and I think that would be true for any school. I noticed that all of my robotics team, I'm also a first robotics coach, all of my robotics team, 2399 Fighting Unicorns, all went straight for Rocket League. I don't know why. But they jumped on there and they were running it. My Heroes of the Storm team, by the way, we're the first ever esports team at an all-girls school in the nation. My Heroes of the Storm team was 5 freshman girls, right? And they were so killer about this. They showed up like every day to practice. They were like, we don't know how to play this game. We're going to learn how to play this game, and we're going to crush those other people. So don't mess with the 9th graders. I'll tell you what.
Okay, and then I'm going to talk about one other model. So the models we've heard so far are mostly school-based or after school. Most of them are competitive. So I'm part of an initiative called the National Scholastic Esports Federation that the Samueli Foundation, Gerald Solomon's here, is in the room, is a primary funder behind. This is a national league that really puts the focus on the work at both the in-school level. So there's a 9th through 12th grade esports curriculum that's been approved by the California around what we call the esports ecosystem. So it's an ELA curriculum that looks at marketing, hospitality, web development, game design. So there's an in-school component, and then there's an after-school component where any school can start a game, what we call a gaming club or an esports club. The focus is on legitimizing kids' interest in games, right? So you'll hear again and again from the panelists that kids want their interest in gaming legitimized within the context of school. It really, really matters to them. A lot of these are kids who nobody pays attention to. They don't sit with anyone at lunch because the thing that they're interested in isn't legitimized in the context of that school. This after-school club, there's all kinds of gaming activities that they can do that NASEF has developed curriculum around, and then you can field a competitive team if you want to. The emphasis of NASEF is not totally on competition. Part of it is if you're interested in getting better, there's a competitive piece. We offer virtual coaching, so that's the piece that I run. We hire college esports players that coach virtually, the high school kids, and it's a near-peer mentorship model. So what we're hoping to do is connect the high school kids to kids just a little bit older than them that are studying all kinds of subjects, right, to give them models of sort of different future selves. And there's also a big research component connected to it. Dr. Constance Steinkuhler has been funded to run research about the league and the kinds of outcomes. So it's nice that it's an empirically based initiative, and we're seeing very interesting outcomes around things around socio-emotional learning, things around kids' GPAs going up because they want to be in the club, right? So there's a GPA requirement for the club. So it's keeping kids in school. And so that research will be coming out later. And the beauty of NASEF is it's all free. So there is free online curriculum. The in-school curriculum is for free. All of the what are called Beyond the Game challenges, which is club curriculum, that's free. We offer coaching for free. So that's a model that's trying to look a little bit more holistically and trying to organize what is now very much the Wild West across the state. What you see here are educators like on their own, in their own schools, coming up like, I'm gonna make this happen. And we're trying to figure out an infrastructure for how interested educators can get on board and find support in a community of practice with others. So as you see, there's lots of different models. I want to shift gears a little bit to have Irvine and Yunhee talk a little bit about their experiences as a parent and a young person trying to make it in esports. So the question I'm just going to ask is, so what does it take as a parent if you have a child who aspires to be an esports player? What does it take?
It basically takes kind of living a lifestyle around esports. We just kind of let Yunhee drive the process, and then we try to support whatever she wants to do. So we channel our resources towards trips, events, equipment, coaching. So it's actually not so different from traditional sports. And I try to keep up with just the industry in general because it's changing so fast. It took me a long time just to understand what was going on, and I feel like I'm getting a grasp of it now, but it's changing all the time. So I know what's going on, so I can help her, be in the right place or doing the right things. I try to also be on Discord, which every esports player.
She's a very evolved mother. Very evolved.
I've even coached one of her teams, and that was really interesting too. But it helped me get insight into the world of kids playing esports competitively. So the other things that we do are kind of social media. Utilize that a lot. Twitter is the choice of esports, and that helps create a presence to the public. And also Instagram has been very useful too, because I'm using that to document our journey, and it's come in handy. And I think later on when she, let's say, tries out for teams or even colleges later, it's it gives you a easy visual of her history. So we also try to, well, most of her competitions are online, but I also try to find as many local, like in-person, IRL, in real life tournaments as possible, so she can get used to playing in front of an audience and get used to the pressure of playing in front of people. So that's, and then we also, whenever we travel, we try to incorporate anything esports related into our travels, whether it's business or leisure. So yeah, and conventions and local events. Those are also very, very important because we go out and meet people. We've gone to big conventions, but like the local events, I think are really important because you get to meet people more closely, and you get to meet who are the local players who are also have a love of Overwatch, and like NYXL, they had a local pop-up LAN. It was at the end of last year, and that was so good because we were able to meet people in the New York City area, and also we got to meet the staff, and that's been super helpful because they have been really, really supportive of us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, I'm going to come back with a question for you.
Okay.
But Yunhee, can you tell us a little bit about what's your story? Like, how did you decide that you wanted to be a professional Overwatch player? When did that happen?
Well, I'm not really sure when it happened, but I've been gaming all my life. It started with Minecraft, actually. And then, I'm not really sure when, but I found Overwatch. And then, I guess from there, I really enjoyed the game. One day I just wanted to go pro, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about your experience? So in a way, you're a bit of an atypical player. So you're a young woman, which we see some of, but not enough. What's your experience been like just in terms of the community, what it's offered you as a young player?
Well, the esports community is very accepting. But like online, in-game, it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, a lot of women experience like guys being like rude or hitting on them.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I would just mute them.
Okay, you've got good
Easiest way.
strategies. Yeah, but when you guys are going around to conventions, what are the other players like? Are they similar age, younger? What's the range of people that see this as a future for themselves?
Kind of varies. I think
Yeah,
mostly young, right?
Yeah, the young. I'd say she's a bit on the young side. She just turned 15. But I'd say maybe like 16 and up, they're becoming like a little more serious about the pro scene.
Okay.
and trying out for pro leagues.
Okay, so it sounded very much like the paradigm of sports. Like you have a young person that wants to be an expert at a kind of sport,
Yeah.
and you're doing the club and the conventions and the competitions and the practice and those kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely.
And then, so my question, the reason I said you're a very evolved parent is that I believe everyone on this panel will say that there is a fair amount of pushback from parents around the fact that we're advocating for kids to play more video games. And also games like Overwatch. So NASEF,
Yeah.
Overwatch is one of the games that is offered. So what's your, how have you thought about gaming as a parent? And have you always been open to it, or has there been a journey? And then what do you hear from other parents?
Yeah, I've always been open to it because she has really enjoyed it.
Well, you told me a
Her
story that
vocabulary?
she learned to read in Minecraft.
Yeah, she learned how to read and write through Minecraft because she had to communicate with her friends.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and her vocabulary just shot through the roof, probably like within a month. So yeah, from that point on, I was like, oh, she's really learning a lot, playing. And then her father was really into it too with Minecraft. He's like, wow, she's building things. You have to think logically. You're thinking physics. You're thinking balance. Just yeah, a lot of skills that you're developing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think she also, well, they have creative, and then they have the what's the other?
Survival.
Survival, yeah. She gravitated toward the survival really fast. So yeah, that was, yeah.
Okay.
That's brutal.
Yeah, question.
You said you played support,
Yeah.
and obviously there's a limited number of places within a team,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a selection of characters. How did you choose and then find your space within that? Why support, and how did that come about as a team choice?
Well, I think for a lot of girls they choose support, but
That's
well,
interesting.
I think I just gravitated towards support, and then from there on I just kept playing it.
And did you find there was sort of tussling? Did someone else want support, or because I imagine then there's a pressure on you to be support. Like you get that role wrong, and you were meant to be there. So that I imagine there's a bit of kind of storming and norming to make that happen in the beginning.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. A
It's
little.
competitive,
It's
right?
competitive.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of teams out there, and there's a lot of ads for
Yeah, people look.
supports or different roles.
Oh really? So they
There-
put advertisements and you answer.
Yeah, on Discord servers.
That's cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of teams. It's called the Open Division, and they create, anyone can create a team actually.
Tank wanted.
Yeah, look, yeah,
Apply.
yeah. So the lingo would be like LFP, looking for players,
Yeah.
and then advertise for it. Sure, yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so we're going to go to our third question, which is really around benefits and risks. So one question we often hear from parents and also educators, often district level educators, superintendents, why? Why on earth would we want this in our schools or in our after school programs? So what are the benefits that you guys are seeing? Anybody here that are seeing?
So I mean, for me, there's a whole lot of benefits. I'll try to run through as quickly as possible. So besides serving probably students who have been underserved in the past, again, big Maslow's before Bloom's. When I slap jerseys on kids who have never worn jerseys before, when people come to our library after school and they watch, we stream it live on Twitch, and the kids play over in the soundproof booth, and there's enough of a delay when they win and they come out, they can see themselves win on the stream, everybody cheers for them. These are kids who have never experienced that before. Social emotional learning benefits, I tackle a lot of that stuff head on. That was part of how I was able to get this approved at my school. I pull up the memes that the kids are all saying in school, and I say, hey guys, here's why this is racist, and here's where this came from. Because a lot of these kids are exposed to things through video games that they were going to be exposed through at a more early age. And so I tackle all that stuff head on. And it was interesting. When I was trying to get Overwatch approved, I had 6 girls, and they all wanted to play support, who were going to come out for the team. But once we moved to Rocket League, because the Board of Ed voted it down, I lost them all. But I still, number one, and one of my goals next year, I believe being inclusive is, it's something you have to go out and do. So I'm going to go find girls to play. I'm going to go recruit them. But on the other hand, I spend a lot of time talking to my boys about being open-minded, and whoever you're playing with, boy or girl or anything, being supportive. And so tackling that head-on, I think, is really important. We got a lot of mileage this year out of our partnerships. My kids thought that they were really good when they first started playing, so I got Rutgers to play us, and Rutgers blew our doors off. And then all of a sudden they realized they're not as good as they think they were. But Rutgers also wanted to build on that, so we built a partnership with Rutgers, and they came and played with us a second time, and they stayed after, and they talked to kids about how they're turning their love of video games into STEM careers, or probably the most interesting kid was talking about how he's going to go into accounting, but he's going to go do so at an esports team because that way he can still be involved in something that he cares about. And it's always neat the way things continue to progress. Is a lot of the Rutgers guys now work at the NYXL, and so the NYXL came to my school, and so just for my kids to see the whole kind of gauntlet of going through high school into college into an industry that they care about. I had a few of my kids tell me I didn't think I was. Now they're interested in going to college. They didn't know there was esports teams in college. They didn't know that they could have a more traditional job at an esports organization. And so I think that's been super beneficial. And then I think the other thing that I really encourage when schools want to start esports team is having a whole ecosystem. Right? Like I mentioned earlier, I have kids on my team who don't have any involvement in playing. I have kids who cast, I have kids who write articles, I have kids who do reporting, I have kids who do graphic design, I have kids who do video editing, I have kids who do, I tell the kids, I mean, you see that one guy that made it, there's probably a dozen people behind that kid who's a professional that make his career possible. And so letting my kids know what those careers are, how they can be involved, I think is another benefit, because I think it really is a gateway, besides being the fastest growing industry, I really think it's a gateway to STEM careers, or getting kids excited about maybe more traditional careers in a field that they love. And
Great.
so for me, all of that is the benefits, on top of the competition and more traditional maybe athletic benefits that I get through being a competitive team.
So it's a context that you can expose kids to a range of ideas about different kinds of
And as a middle school
careers.
teacher, that's what I talk. You don't know what you don't know. And so if I can expose my kids, and when they get to high school and beyond, as they want to focus and become, develop expertise in a certain area, right? I always see my job in the classroom as the esports coach, whatever it may be, just as much exposure as possible, so they can really hopefully find their passion in middle school and then develop in high school and beyond.
Okay. Any other benefits anyone wants to chime in around? Josh or Jay?
I would, the big one I think is confidence. It's so powerful to be good at something, and for so long, there's so many kids in all of our communities whose skills have gone either unvalued, undervalued, or just completely unappreciated. And so they spend this time in a world that they feel like people don't care about, people don't understand, and all of a sudden your favorite teacher or somebody in your community says that this has value, I'm gonna help you get better at it, I'm gonna give you some guidance. So the two things that I would say is one, confidence. The other part of that is through esports, we can offer mentorship to these kids who are not getting that from traditional sports or other places. A lot of our kids look up to Ninja and a lot of these other streamers, and while some of them are good, you can't talk to your teacher in this, or those people, like the way you can talk to your teacher or somebody in your community. And I think that esports and the rise of esports is going to allow a whole generation of mentors who, for the last 20 years, we've all been trying to figure it out. And some of us made it out okay and some of us didn't. But we literally don't do that with any other things that our kids do. So why are we letting them kind of just figuring it out on their own? I think that there's parents are in a really tough position because they're asked to regulate and create rules for a world that they don't understand or are unwilling to understand. And so it relies on us to create those structures and those avenues for those kids to, one, learn and gain that confidence, but then also to be there and just be a human, to be like, hey, great job, or hey, Timmy, you're good, but you're not that good. Like, pace yourself a little bit. You got a lot of work to do. And that's the role of a coach. That's what coaches do. And I think that this world, as we establish the bottom rungs, those coaches are going to be very, very influential on the rest of the industry.
I mean, maybe just to jump on that real quick too, I love that point just because I think as adults we do a really bad job helping kids navigate like the world of the internet and stuff like that. And I see esports as an opportunity to help them better learn to navigate, because you guys know as educators, the stuff that you hear in the classroom and then you dig into where they find that stuff, it's all on the internet, unsupervised, and it's just, some of the stuff is ridiculous. And if we could, play a small part in helping them, better learn to navigate that world, I think that's fantastic through esports.
Yep. Okay, so then before we open it for a big Q&A, what are the risks? Like, what are we worried about as educators, as parents, as players? As esports is a bit of a Wild West at the moment, it does seem to be in a bit of a bubble. Who knows what will happen? But what are we worried about?
I'll say, I think the reason why we started looking at it at the Department of Education is because it's going to have a large impact on education, right? First high school football game was played about 150 years ago, and it's impossible to say that football hasn't affected education. It decides who goes to school, where they go to school, what gets built, what we raise money for, right? Esports is going to have that same effect. Now, maybe there's things that you change about football, maybe there's not, but we're at the start of esports here in middle schools, right? In high schools and colleges, and we need to guide it in the right direction. And for me in particular, I think the biggest question is who's going to get invited and who's going to be excluded, particularly when you start talking about scholarship money.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Can I just add, that's actually, it's interesting because I come from the UK where we don't have scholarships for sport and we don't
Not
have
yet.
soccer moms and we don't, like, sport is not that big. And so I'm listening to Americans saying, you know,
It's big.
it's really big.
It's
and,
big.
And sport, your football decides who goes to school and what school they go to. It's just like culturally defined for me.
You're talking about it could raise somebody up out of poverty and give them a life that they could
Yeah.
possibly have never
And-
had. It's huge.
No, we have social security instead. We just do it for everyone. But sorry, but no, seriously though, I just find that culturally really interesting. That esports is going to have such a profound effect because your sports do anyway.
So when I wrote an article about this in 2017, the year before there had been about 30 esports scholarships from universities out there, and that year we saw 60. By the time that I wrote a similar article about 18 months later, there were, I think, 180. So universities are glomming onto this and throwing money into it. But again, if you're selecting games, and by selecting games, you're essentially selecting demographics, then what you're doing is creating a scholarship fund for a particular demographic. That has problems, equity implications.
Command and conquer.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a question here? Yeah, or comment? Yes. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
To piggyback off of that, are there esports scouts the way that there are? Okay. 'Cause
Yes.
I'm
If
just
you
curious about
I'll tell you a real quick
Yes.
crazy story. So I was talking to IBM and what they're doing with Watson, and they showed me a program that can actually troll through Twitter and assess the people playing video games on, Twitch. And they can assess the people playing video games on Twitch and will actually spit out like a rating for how good that streamer is based on what they're seeing through the stream. It was pretty crazy. So their scouting is pretty big, or at least going to be.
Yeah, question in the back.
So related to the idea of scholarships and lifting students out of poverty, as far as I know, and maybe I'm sure you know this better than I, currently there's not a requirement for competitive esports pros to go to college.
There's not.
And so I think, speaking of my friend from the UK, that's a huge difference based on the football world versus the football world of Europe, meaning that it's less likely for the future pros to go to college at all, right? They'll go straight to their esports. And so I just sort of want to get a sense of what, if you think that we in America will create that culture where you go to college and college teams become the big local rivalries, or if they're going to bypass that step as the European soccer world.
Can I just jump on and just provide a reminder too that the scholarships that are provided here are not athletic scholarships. They are predominantly merit scholarships, right? So that means that they don't come along with Title IX responsibilities and restrictions.
Yeah, Reeran.
So during our travels, wherever there's like a college that has an esports program or Overwatch team, we try to visit, and it's kind of interesting. It seems like the schools that are really trying to up their game, they are forming relationships with the pro teams, and the pro teams, they retire at a very young age. So they still have a lot of time after they retire to go back and finish their education. So these schools are hoping to scoop them up and form teams, and then they're going to just, blow everybody out of the water, basically.
Yeah, this is one of the risks, is right now there's no clear roadmap for the relationship between the profession, between college, between high schools, between middle schools. It's just craziness going on right now. It's very profit driven, particularly at the professional level. There's a lot of exploitation of players. In a way, it's actually not a place that we want our kids to go in many cases. So there's beginning to be work within the industry to say, wow, we have to relook at this. One way to relook at it is to say, oh, we have to think, where are these kids going to go after they retire? Well, colleges might be a place for them to go. So there is a worry that the right kind of pipeline or right kind of relationships aren't put in place where education is really valued versus this just compete, and there's money. It's a very big game, a very big money sport at the moment. I don't know that there's a single college where it's not a sanctioned sport at colleges yet. It's outside of the NCAA.
Yeah.
They're club teams. I think universities are trying to situate it, right? There's that conversation happening.
Yeah.
In a way that might be good. It comes with some kinds of regulations, which might be good.
Some schools are under the athletic department, and I think those schools tend to gravitate towards the athletic department because of the funding. Then the athletics department has money; they'll buy the equipment and subsidize travel for sports and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then the other concern, just that's coming up in this conversation, is that the focus is just on the competitive players, which in essence are a very small handful. If you have a club at school, 6 of those kids are playing competitively. There's all of these other kids that love gaming and want to do stuff in and around it. So having educators involved, as Chris and Josh and Jane, everybody's talked about, is sort of diversifying the pathways of participation, how we think about it, not only who plays, what we play, but also when we're working with kids in and around it, what are all the things they might be able to do, right? Because we want to make multiple pathways out rather than this very, very narrow funnel, which we just know historically in sports, like the number of kids that actually become professional basketball players is incredibly small. That should not be our aspiration. Our aspiration should be, well, this is my opinion, to create learning contexts that celebrate what kids are interested in. And they're amazing contexts to do all of this work that we're talking about: SEL work, character development work, academic orientation work, workforce development work. So I think as educators, we have to stay focused on that rather than getting caught up in like this pipeline piece of thing. So Yunhee, this may be your future, but it's not the future for all kids. And it's great to have that be a future, but it should be one option of many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why that's kind of the backup plan. Let's say she doesn't make it, or after she retires, she still has plenty of time to go back to school and play for the schools, and maybe even get scholarships for it. And I wanted, when you said you're from England, so last year.
Sorry.
Oh, Scotland. sorry. Sorry. But some colleges, some hardcore colleges are actually recruiting players from Europe. They're flying the families in, and yeah.
I mean, it exists. It's just the cultural things that just weigh your sport over years. Fascinating.
Yeah.
It's not
It
a bad
is.
thing. It's just
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to open it up to Q&A. We have about 5 minutes. We'll go here. I'm just going to jump around. Yes, sir. I don't have a good laser pointer. Yeah.
So we've talked about the pro teams. Do the students look at pro teams as an aspirational path to follow? Do they have role models? Do they care about the individual player? Like I grew up idolizing Daryl Strawberry. Is there an equivalent, a documented ninja put on the teams? Are there players you want to? Do you need to model your game after someone? Do you look at the pros as where you want to get specific pros you follow?
Oh yeah, she's already had her dream come true.
Yeah.
Well,
1v1.
I got to 1v1 one of the NYXL players. His name is Jonak.
Oh yeah.
He's probably like the best player, the best support player in the Overwatch League.
In the world, probably.
You beat him though.
Beat him? I killed him a few times.
But that was meaningful to you,
Yeah,
that
it was really
connection.
meaningful.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But why, can I just dig at, like, what's at the heart of your question? Why
Well, I look at traditional sports and you pick the person you want to be. And when I look at esports now, I think it seems to focus around the camaraderie with your teammates and the game that you've become really kind of into and gotten better at. But is there still that sense of there are heroes in this world that you kind of
I would say a lot of the kids gravitate more towards streamers. What I see is they idolize a lot of streamers, for good or for bad. But I know, like in the town next to mine, there was a Overwatch player named Clockwork. And so I emailed him. I said, hey, we're literally right next door to you. And he had signed on to help us out and stuff like that. And a lot of my kids, when I told them, knew who he was, and they were super excited about it. So I would say probably Twitch streamers more than folks on the teams. But I would say those, the Yunhees out there know who the players are on the actual teams.
and they represent good role models.
Sometimes that's part of what we're trying to do is make sure they just like regular athletes understand their responsibility. Hopefully they understand the responsibility they have to be good role models.
Can I say we experienced something radically different at our school, right? So our students do not look up to pro athletes, are not familiar with pro teams. They largely do not watch streamers. And I've noticed some parallels in some of the research between girl engagement in STEM topics and girl engagement in game topics. And it seems like there seems to be kind of this dropout that occurs in middle school, right, where they recognize at times, at least I've noticed this on my own, right? that there are times when they recognize the toxicity of the culture and say, maybe that's not for me, and sometimes they move away from multiplayer games towards single-player games. So largely the students that I have are single-player games or couch co-op game players, and so they come with a passion and a desire for games, and they feel like their entire lives they have not been validated for that, right? Because nobody cares if they're really good at Stardew Valley or in Mario Kart. And so they come in and they want to play games and they want to find other people to play games. They're hungry for that, right? And they don't see themselves represented online. And so that's why it's so important for us, at least at our school, to have those doors open and say, we're going to rotate games and play different kinds of games there.
Yeah, and part of what I'm hearing in your question is this question of who are the role models, and that is a space of possibility here, is to change the conversation around who the role models are, because there's one version of it, which is the pro players, which is a very narrow version, but there could be many others. So how do we celebrate the kids that are actually playing? I know just in our work with coaches that the people we hire, professional level players, they are desperate to give back. So these are very, in a way, service-minded individuals that they say, wow, if we'd only had this when I was in high school, it would have changed my life. So there is a population of players that are very service-oriented, very positive-oriented that can be recruited into this effort, which is, there's a good opportunity there if we can figure out how to do it. Yep, question over here.
Just a little bit off of what you were saying. In your programs at the school, do you incorporate like a curriculum or class around digital responsibility, like being digital citizens? And the reason I say that is, once you're on these platforms or even, playing with these groups, the negative comments will come in. And how do you help the kids to be safe online? Because you may have, activity where somebody's trying to commit fraud, get them to sign up for stuff, or, online cyberbullying, things of that sort. And just from my experience working with some people from the math gaming team in Dallas, they talked about their professional players and how they really look at the players' personalities online, like how they respond to people. If they're doing a bad job or they're not having a good game day, how do they respond back to people when they're not having that good day? And that was part of the way they picked some of their players to be on those NBA 2K teams. So I kind of wanted to see, do you teach your kids that when you are, forming these clubs and groups, how to be good citizens online?
Yeah, so I mean, outside of esports, as a classroom teacher, and throughout my entire district, K through 8, we do have a digital citizenship curriculum that we follow. It's pushed in one way or another in all of our classes. But I would say that specifically in esports, I have a digital citizenship curriculum that probably is more intense and tackles more specific things that my kids might encounter while playing games or beyond. A lot of my kids bring a lot of stuff that they find on 4chan, a lot of stuff that they find on Reddit into the classroom, and having to work through that kind of space, which is a space that parents, it's so beyond where parents even understand. I would say that I spend a lot of time getting real sticky into the weeds with like some real serious, stuff that's more intense than a regular digital citizen who's phishing you, somebody with cyberbullying. The cyberbullying you get outside of esports, I think, is different than what you might see as part of a esports, I don't know. Web.
Okay, I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I think we have one more question.
Oh yeah, one question. Oh, I don't know how to pick.
Hey, can I just add something just
Yeah.
real quick to that? The thing that I think is huge is making sure we have these curriculums, but then also having people who can hit that thing again and again and again. It's a lot about the repetition. So, we could teach it to them once, but then you need your teachers and your coaches like hammering that home on a daily basis. We've got a sign on the way out of the game gym that says, you can be anybody you want to be online, be somebody you're proud of. And they see that every day, and we hammer it home too. So I think it's also, there's such a need for educators and coaches to first deliver that message, but then be present to hammer that message home.
Okay, so I actually don't think we have any time left, so, but can we stay in this room? Does anybody know?
There's a panel right
Okay, anyway, these folks are super nice, so come up afterwards and talk to them. They will be around, and thank you so much, you guys.